Hi everyone, welcome to which day are we on now? Wednesday session. Apologies, with Ed, live at midday, talking about workplace relations and how you are impacted during the COVID-19 crisis. Thanks for those of you that tuned in yesterday when we were at David Kochie's office. Kochie, as I like to call him these days, having been on his show with him yesterday. Thank you for that. It was a privilege to be on there. And also a pleasure to introduce his business to so many of our viewers who kindly tuned in and looked on there as well. We're catching up on questions from yesterday because there were so many on the two different streams that we did. So we'll be catching on those during the day today. A big day though today. There was a sort of relative flood of news from the ATO last night, and I'm going to speak a lot about that as the day goes on, as the session goes on, so that I can explain to you exactly where we all stand on JobKeeper as of right now. More information is coming out by the day. We spent the morning on the telephone to the ATO trying to get some clarification on things. I'll pass on that information to you. Before we go into that, I'm going to try to hold you back, keep you chomping at the bit for more information on JobKeeper, and try and do my best as a business owner and in collaborating with you to encourage us to be not just thinking JobKeeper, JobKeeper, JobKeeper. I appreciate that that is a rescue boat that we're all trying to get on at this time, but we do owe it to ourselves and our businesses to be trying to think more about how we make the best of opportunity going forward. Now, I've got a great shout out here just to start that off. Lee, the name of our client in Canberra, please.
Pilates Can
in Canberra. First of all, thank you very much for your business, Pilates Can. Now, what they've had to do, bearing in mind the restriction on things like Pilates and yoga studios and gyms, and them having been shut down, they've pivoted very successfully, having lost hundreds of bookings as a result of that. They've pivoted very successfully to doing virtual Pilates sessions for their clients, which is a fantastic pivot that they're finding to have been a very successful one. So I just wanted to give them a shout out for thinking forward. It's really important that we do that during this period, and we try and move into the period of opportunity. In that regard, I'm just going to urge you to listen to a couple of podcasts I listened to last night on the way home that were just really very powerful, actually, in terms of, if you like, world-class people operating and finding opportunity in the current circumstances. So there's we'll probably post the link of this on here, but there's a podcast series called Masters of Scale, which is by this chap called Reid Hoffman, who founded LinkedIn and PayPal and is a sort of Silicon Valley superstar. And he basically interviews all his chums from various huge Silicon Valley type companies on this podcast. But there's been a recent sequence of them relating to COVID-19 and what businesses are doing through them. And the one that I listened to last night that was really powerful, to be honest, was by the CEO of Airbnb, a guy called Brian Chesky, and what he is doing to work through COVID-19. So we might, from the outside, look at that and say, look, this is a huge company worth billions of dollars. What problems have they got versus ours? But the reality is that Brian Chesky was trying to list his business about a month ago. And what he describes COVID-19 as being like, he said, it was like being captain of a ship that just got torpedoed. And there's been various problems that have flown out of the COVID-19 crisis for him, not least his aborted IPO. But also he had hundreds of thousands of bookings that suddenly couldn't go ahead. They had to look at changing their refund policy to guests so that the guests didn't have their noses out of joint. That consequently put their hosts' noses out of joint. They needed to deal with that and manage that challenge. They also needed to start lobbying the government to make sure that they weren't excluded from subsidies that businesses like hotels were getting. And I have to say, the way he organised himself through the crisis management phase into the planning phase and now looking at opportunity was just really quite admirable. It left me sort of wanting to sort of jump out of my car and get cracking with the future. So have a listen to that if you get a chance. There was a second podcast on there that was talking specifically about subsidies in America, the JobKeeper equivalent over there, which, by the way, is a damn sight more bloody complex than JobKeeper is here, amazingly. I was listening to that, and at the end of that podcast, it was a really interesting analysis on the kind of businesses that are doing well, the kind of businesses that are finding opportunity in all of this. And what was said in that is that if you look at a thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is the thing just behind me here, and I'll zoom in on it in a second. Those of you that have heard of that before, it's a sort of a cornerstone of HR practice. And what it is a hierarchy of needs that humans generally have, going up through a pyramid-shaped structure. Up from the bottom, which are your most basic physiological needs, the sort of food and shelter that we need to survive, moving up to different types of needs. Right at the top is this concept of self-actualization. And I won't get too deep in in what each level really means and so forth. But in essence, what it's meant to mean is this: is that humans need all the things on the bottom rungs of the triangle. And you're really getting yourself to your pinnacle of performance and happiness if you can get up to things like self-actualization in time. But the reason it was interesting, and that's enough sort of HR theory for the moment, the reason the podcast was interesting was not because of a review of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it was because the person being interviewed related that to the types of businesses that are doing well. In this time of crisis, we've got less need for that stuff at the top of the pyramid. We've got less need for the things that we find purpose in, and you might just be able to see, but I'll read out each section of it. So the top of the pyramid is this thing called self-actualization, and that feels like discretionary spend at the moment. That's things that we are finding purpose in and connection to, that is beyond things like material gain and material requirements. So the level below that is esteem. Now, esteem equally is starting to get towards a discretionary spend. So esteem includes things like respect, self-esteem, status, recognition. So the kind of businesses that flow from that would be classically things like fashion retail. So you're wanting to wear certain clothes to make yourself feel better. And perfectly valid reasons for running businesses with strong missions. But again, they're starting to feel like discretionary spend businesses. Equally, even some of the exercise businesses, gyms, Pilates, yoga studios, they do have health benefits, but some people would have been going to them as a sort of social element for their esteem rather than for the core fundamentals of that. And those are the kind of businesses and those top rungs, those discretionary spend businesses that are both suffering at the moment and likely to suffer going forward in the view of this podcast. The ones that are doing well are when you go down to the bottom of the triangle. Physiological needs is the very bottom of the triangle. And that's what we basically need to survive. That's our air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing. So if you look at the very basics that we need, so food, for example, classically the businesses that are doing well at the moment are things like food delivery businesses. Even some of the more novel businesses like those meal kit businesses like HelloFresh and things like that are starting to do quite well because of these physiological needs that we have at the moment. So it does include clothing, but it's a different type of clothing to a fashion business. It's just meeting our basic needs to make sure that we're fed, watered, and cared for, essentially. Interestingly, it includes their reproduction needs. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but those of you that have been reading business press, there are various online resources that are very popular at the moment, and I won't say any more than that, but that's a classic basic need of our human natures that people are plugging into. Then we go up to safety needs. That's security, employment, classically resources, health, and property. So these are things also that are doing pretty well at the moment. So think about mental health as one. So businesses that are helping people through this, even your doctors and so forth, are busy because of this. So one above our physiological needs are our safety needs. And even I just scribbled to the side, you won't be able to see it, but where some businesses are up at esteem, like fashion or exercise, the best pivots I'm seeing are those that are saying, look, actually, let's get out of this esteem category and let's get into this safety category. So looking, for example, at exercise as a health issue rather than being the member of a club that's a nice place to go for your esteem. It's actually going and doing exercise for the physical benefits. So we've heard that a lot from the government, that they don't want to stop us exercising, for example, because it's very important to our health, physically and mentally. And businesses like Pilates Can have pivoted to that and saying, actually, let's move out of esteem with our studio and into the safety needs, the health needs that we have. So those are the businesses that are really thriving in this post-COVID-19 economy. And then above that, the last rung that I'll talk about is love and belonging. So there's this core element that we all need as humans of friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. So the businesses that are doing really well out of that are things like Zoom and Netflix and things like that, that people are just finding some connection to, some sense of community, I suppose. And there would be businesses doing really well out of that. And I think actually going forward that a lot of us as small businesses will thrive coming off the back of this, because I think that one of the disruptive elements of what's occurred is that there will be a growing sense of support for the small business community, where we all realize that we live in essentially little villages in whichever suburb that we live in and so forth. And that we want to support those businesses. We want them to survive through this. We want the local hair salon, beauty salon to get through this and support them, because we need it in our life. We need the dry cleaners. We need the childcare business. All of those businesses that probably sit in that sense of community in the middle there. Why am I telling you all of this? Well, it helped me yesterday when I was going through it to listening to this, just to start thinking about EmploySure and what my opportunities are, how I'm structuring my thinking on opportunity in relation to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's no point at this stage in thinking too high up the hierarchy. Your businesses that are going to do well at the moment are really tapping into those physiological, safety, and love and belonging needs. And if you're pivoting your business, that's what you should be thinking about at the moment. How can I tap into this physiological need? I'm a fashion business that's going to move from making fashion items, but I'm going to use my supply chain and manufacturing capability to create PPE. That's a classic pivot that we're hearing about at the moment. And that's where you're seeing someone go from esteem down into physiological needs and seeing their business thrive as a result. So there's just a bit of, I suppose, thinking that occurred for me yesterday after my drive home, or during my drive home when I was listening to this podcast. It was a really good way of structuring, I thought, the kind of ways that we should be looking at as business owners at opportunities, trying to move away from those top rungs of Maslow's hierarchy. So, guys, that was one point that I wanted to cover today before moving on to JobKeeper. And JobKeeper really is sitting as a sort of throbbing item on the agenda today. It just has been just about every day for the last 2 weeks. And I'm certainly not sick and tired of JobKeeper, because it's going to be a huge part of my life and the survival of my business going forward as well. But I just wanted to update you. I asked you to shout out if anyone had heard from the ATO. At about 3:30 yesterday, we started getting a barrage of communication from you guys saying, yep, I've just had a text message. And what that text message did was communicate an update to the ATO's website about JobKeeper. And second to that, what also came out yesterday was the JobKeeper rules. So you'll remember when the law got passed, we said, great, the law's passed, but we don't know how it's actually going to work, because you need a set of rules to explain the law. Those rules got published yesterday as well. So those two things have given us more insight as to what we need to do now about JobKeeper as businesses. I have to say there's still a lack of clarity about certain things, and I'll come on to specifically that at the moment, which is why we've been on the phone to the ATO this morning. I have to say credit to the ATO where it's due. They were picking up the phone within a minute this morning, answering our questions. Unfortunately, the answers that they were giving were really quite triaged answers. They've obviously scaled up their call center capability, and the people on there are basically just saying, look at the website. And we're saying, well, unfortunately, the website doesn't make clear what the situation is. We need information. And when you actually really look at the website, what it says is more information will come soon, is the blunt reality of it. But there are some snippets of that information, and there's some snippets from the calls that we've had this morning with the ATO that do start to help colour the picture for us around some of those core concerns that you have. So let's start with the first core concern, which is eligibility. I am worried that my business won't qualify for JobKeeper because I have not seen a 30% downturn in March relative to March 2019. So first of all, what we now know from the website and the JobKeeper rules is that the way in which they're going to be looking at the downturn in turnover is by your GST income. So that's what they'll be looking at on your BAS return to see what your income is for GST purposes and whether there has been a downturn. In the simplest scenario, your March looks 30% less than March in the prior year. Great if you fall into that category, but I suspect if you do and it's all as clear as that, as tough as times are being for you, you're probably not listening to me bang on every day, because most people that are tuning into this and asking me questions are saying, I don't quite fit into that for some reason. So what the rules expressly say is you don't just have to look at March. You can look at April or even any subsequent month, as long as you're comparing it to the prior period. You can also look at on a quarterly basis if a monthly basis for some reason doesn't paint the right picture. So there's a bit of variety as to how you can show what seems to be fixed is this concept of a 30% downturn in your GST income, your GST related income. So that's a starting point. Does it really help us out? No, because there's plenty of us that say, oh, well, I wasn't around last March. I'm less than a year old in business. I had a bad March last year, so this year it looks better, but in reality, I'm down from the month prior. So there's lots of different variations on a theme, which is, I'm just worried I don't qualify. How am I going to find out? So the answer to that doesn't come out of the rules in any particular way, other than that the rules expressly talk about there being a discretion on the part of the ATO. And that's that discretion that we've been saying we hope exists so that those businesses that aren't cookie cutter shaped get the benefit of JobKeeper. So how they're going to apply the discretion doesn't come out of the rules. The website's not clear on it. There's nothing on there. So that when you actually pick up the phone to the ATO and you say, okay, guys, my business is not cookie cutter shaped. What's going to happen to me? Am I going to, first of all, be eligible? And then second to that, when will I find out? We'll talk about that in a second. The answer on the phone has been opaque is probably a polite term for it. They've said, go and look at the website. We only know as much as on the website. But when we pushed them on the phone and said, come on, guys, you've got to give us some guidance as to whether we're going to be eligible or not. The answer was, what we believe is that there's going to be a high degree of self-certification. And the reason for that seems to be, and I'm filling in the blanks here, the reason for that seems to be is that it's physically just going to be bloody impossible for the ATO to process 800,000 applications. So they're, in essence, by the sounds of it, and this isn't written anywhere, this is just from the sounds of it, they're going to say, you tell us if you're eligible, point us to why, and probably it will be exception rather than rule that we say, no, I'm sorry that you're not. And therefore eligibility will flow from that. That seems to be the way they're edging towards it. Most worryingly for me is that they've put this odd gatepost on it and said you can't actually apply until the 20th of April. So another just under a week from now is before you can actually even start to apply. So why they're losing that week of time, presumably to try and get their systems in place and so forth. But In the meantime, we're all left a bit in the dark. And the truth is, most of the stuff on the ATO website doesn't go as to eligibility. It just talks about how to pay. It doesn't talk about eligibility. And you'll remember I've been banging the same drum here, which is, unless you're eligible, you shouldn't be paying, because if you do, you run the risk of being out of pocket. And I'm going to keep banging that drum today. I still think that's the right case, because I think as prudent business owners, you cannot rush out and start paying until you know that you're eligible for it. So the outcome of that, I suppose, is that you won't be able to apply until the 20th of April, quite possibly. It will be a case of essentially self-certifying to say that you are eligible, but we'll have to see as time goes by as to whether the people that we spoke to in the call centre today are accurate in that. It's certainly not written anywhere. So in the meantime, you need to register with the ATO, register your interest if you haven't already. I suspect that you have. You go on their website and do that. You should then be looking critically at your numbers, I suppose, to get your ducks in a line, to make your case, to say, can I, for a period of no less than a month, show that my GST-related income is 30% down from this time last year? It could be March, could be April, it could be over a longer period if you're looking at it that. Can I organise my information well enough so that when it comes to it, I can show that I am eligible? And in doing so, you will have a sense, bearing in mind the rules, as to whether you are eligible. There will be some businesses that are simply not going to be eligible because they haven't gone backwards, they've in fact gone forwards. There's going to be this grey area of business where it doesn't yet make clear that they have gone backwards, but they're likely to. For example, the retail example, the real estate example we keep hearing, which is, I'm getting paid now for work that I did months ago, but I can see the work currently is dried up. So you want to be lining up your ducks in order to get ready to make your case when the 20th of April comes, at which stage you're going to be allowed to apply. What that application process exactly looks at, I can't tell you. All I can say is prepare for the worst, which is assume you're going to need a lot of information and it's going to be there ready to make your case. You just don't want to be scrounging around in emails and asking your accountant for information come the 20th of April. You want to get that application in then, so that you can hopefully get it turned around as quickly as possible. Now, if you decide in making the assessment that you are either not eligible or you otherwise don't want to apply, and I'll talk a bit in a moment as to why you might want to do that. Just looking at my team here, have we got to?
No, we're fine. We're
okay.
Fine.
So there are other reasons why you actually might decide not to do that. But if you decide not to apply, what we're recommending that you do is tell your employees if you're not applying. Control the communication. Don't leave them expecting. We can help our clients with memos to that effect and so forth. But you should inform your employees. It's not a legal requirement. That's just us saying, look, best practice, best communication would be that if you're not decided not to apply or you're otherwise not eligible, then you should be telling your employees just so that they understand what the situation is. If you are applying and you seem to be eligible, you need, before the 20th of April, you should be determining which of your employees are eligible. Now, this is a crucial bit as to some of the questions we've been receiving. Most of the questions in respect to this have been, do I have to pay JobKeeper to everyone who is potentially eligible? The short answer on the face of the legislation is yes, but there's a but, as there always is in these things. There is a grey area, which is that you have a group of casuals potentially who need to have worked for a year regularly and systematically for you to deem them eligible. And it seems that you're going to essentially certify those people as being regular and systematic. There's no suggestion that the ATO or anyone else is going to work that out for you. The current situation seems to be that you're going to put their name to the ATO and say, these are the people that are eligible. So you could, in principle, look at that and say, look, on a subjective basis, there is no objective rule as to whether someone's regular and systematic. I don't think this person is eligible, and therefore they only do 1 hour a week, that hour's intermittent, whatever it is. If you can make a case as to why they might not be regular and systematic, and you otherwise don't want to be digging in and quite often topping up to the $1,500, then you wouldn't be notifying that they are eligible, nor would you be notifying the ATO that you consider them to be eligible. So to those employees that are eligible, what we're doing is recommending that you send a notice to them. And one of the things that they're going to have to do is provide a form back to you. So there's a bit of an administrative pain that you're going to have to go through, depending on how many employees you've got that are eligible, that you will need to get them to fill in a form, essentially saying, yes, I want this business to be my eligible employer who is going to go and claim JobKeeper for me. So you'll need to go through that process. And let me just check on the exact date so I get that right. So you need to complete and return, or the employee needs to complete and return that by the 20th of April. If they don't get that back to you by the 20th of April, this is notwithstanding the fact that you haven't even applied by then, but you can go onto the ATO website to get the form, and the employee needs to give that back to you by the 20th of April, upon which you're going to be applying, saying, yeah, these are the eligible employees who have returned the form to me. If they don't return the form to you, you can't nominate them as eligible. So you need those people to return that form. So we're helping our clients with that communication, the to and fro between their employees, to make sure they're doing the right thing and collecting those employees' forms up, so that you can then notify the ATO that those are the eligible employees who should get paid. Now, this is where it starts to get really mucky, in my view, and where the ATO unfortunately hasn't been clear this morning. If you read the ATO website on its face, it basically says, then just start paying your employees. There are going to be two, what they're calling JobKeeper fortnights in April, one of which is already finished. It started actually on the 28th, Monday, the 28th of March, I think it was, and it's already finished. So you'll already have made your payroll on this. And then you, in a couple of weeks' time, you'll have a second JobKeeper payroll. If you pay fortnightly, this is a JobKeeper fortnight. And they're saying pay out the $1,500 to anyone who, on their face, is eligible, regardless of the fact that you have not yet even submitted an application to the ATO, let alone being confirmed as eligible. And we rang up and saying, are you seriously telling us that you want employers to pay out this money, notwithstanding that there's plenty of them that don't know for sure if they're eligible, and presumably then if they're not eligible, they're going to have paid out money they might not otherwise have had to, and you're not going to pay them back? And the poor person that had been tasked with our calls in their contact center this morning just unfortunately just doesn't have an answer to that. And it says the ATO hasn't given them a clear answer to it, other than that they are saying, yes, please pay your staff the JobKeeper payment today, and don't worry about it, should be all right in the future. And I'm saying, I'm sorry, that's just a massive gap. If you look at the scale of that across the country, to be asking every employer that's on the ropes anyway to dip into their pocket on the risk that they are not going to get paid back from the government is really, really risky for me. And I think that the better way to do it will be for you to submit your application on the 20th. By then, you should have all your eligible employee details. Notify the ATO of that. As soon as you get confirmation that you are an eligible employer, then I would suggest back paying to the eligible employees the two sets of $1,500 to the extent they haven't already been paid in wages. I hope that makes sense. I think what we'll do here, and on the recommendation of one of the viewers actually yesterday, was start drawing out some flowchart infographics to say that this is exactly how the process will work and the dates that we recommend that you do things by. Now, where the ATO is still not clear is, if I don't pay my people now, and then we drip into May, are you saying that when you start paying it, and if I've got no clarification from you as to whether I'm eligible or not, am I going to be somehow prevented from claiming it because I haven't paid it earlier? The ATO, again, just is not clear on that at this stage. They're urging us to just pay, but I just don't think, as prudent business owners, unless you're a certain type of business, you should not be paying this at the moment. And that certain type of business is the business that I've said previously that I think JobKeeper is best suited for anyway, which is the business that is still operating. It still has staff. that are working, and those staff are working for reward for income of more than $1,500 per fortnight. So in essence, you're paying them anyway, and you should be paying them for work that they're completing, and you can subsequently claim that back. The people that I'm really worried about are the other two types of staff, which are people that might still be working, but they're earning less than $1,500, or they are on some form of unpaid leave or stand down and are earning zero at the moment, and therefore the ATO is asking you to pay $1,500 or top up and then hope in the future you get it back. Those guys, honestly, I just think it would be careless, frankly, for you to rush out and start paying if you fall into any sort of grey about eligibility. If it's absolutely black and white that you are a 30% downturn business, March on March, then look, that's a business decision for you, but I can see why you just get on with it and pay it. But if you've got any sort of grey, a prudent business owner shouldn't be paying out extra cash flow at this time without confirmation from the ATO. So that was probably the muckiest area of what's still outstanding from the ATO, and I'm pleading with them to the extent that any of them tune into this, or you can otherwise point them towards this to say, guys, we need some clarity on this and we need it quickly. We've already had one payroll that's been. Those people, frankly, shouldn't have been paid $1,500 in that last payroll if they hadn't otherwise earned it. Consequently, we need quickly to understand what the expectation from the ATO is, how quickly they're going to process our eligibility claims so that we can move forward with this, not just to our own benefit, to the benefit of our employees. We don't want to be caught as the middleman with our employees criticising us for not paying them, when in truth we don't know if we're eligible. Other actions for you to take. So just a reminder there, you've got to issue the employees with a nomination notice by the 15th of April, ideally, which is today, if not, no later than the 20th of April. You could also tell the people that are not eligible, and we'd suggest doing that again by the 20th of April to say, we don't think you're eligible because you weren't employed on the 1st of March 2020, you haven't been 12 months in casual, you are not regular and systematic, various reasons. Again, for our clients, I'd urge you to speak to us about how you inform people so that those you're deciding not to put forward as eligible are told clearly that they are not and why not. 20th of April, enroll with the ATO. Then you'll start getting information from the ATO about eligibility processing and so forth. The ATO would say, carry on making payments to employees. I've just said, be careful of that. Be very careful of that. If you qualify, you'll hear about it after the 20th of April, hopefully by no later than the 30th of April. Once you hear about that, notify your employees again that you have applied and have qualified, and that therefore you're going to start making the payments. You may also, depending on what you hear during that notification process, do some back payment in relation to it. If you haven't qualified, i.e. you applied and you get rejected, you'll again need to send something to your employees to explain that, what that means for them consequently, and so forth. And then once you have qualified, if you have qualified, and this is the sort of thing we'll put in the flow chart, you'll need to apply online to get the payment back from the ATO. It says that it's going to do it, I think, from 10 days at the beginning of each month. So they're saying that you should hear back by, I think, the 10th of May, if it's confirmed that you've qualified. So there's a bit of process for you. We'll put that into a document today that's just a bit clearer to read than the 15-page set of rules that I've just been through, and a bit clearer than the stuff that's on the ATO website, because there's just so many ifs and buts there, and what you need is recommendations. Take it from me, guys, as friendly as the ATO might be being about getting this done, there is an interest in keeping the wheel turning in a way that might not be to your benefit. And you have to wear that business owner hat at this stage and say, if I don't know that I'm eligible, if there is any sense of grey about whether I might be, I should not, as a prudent business owner, be paying people money that is not wages at this stage, money that they have not earned by the work they've done for me. I shouldn't be topping them up. I shouldn't be paying people on stand down until I've got confirmation of my eligibility. So that's a longer than usual start from me, guys. I hope you found the stuff about Maslow's hierarchy useful. We'll try and put something up about that as well today, I think, just highlighting the kind of businesses that are succeeding in the COVID-19 economy. And other than that, let's crack in some questions. Stu.
Sure. Let's kick it off with one from Samantha Gearing. She's a client from Country Chef Bakery. She's asking a question that's been asked in a lot of different ways by a lot of different people.
Yeah.
The recent rules released by Treasury indicate that if you meet the income reduction test for a period of 1 month, then you are an eligible employer for the full 6 months. We anticipate a reduction in income for April, but not May or June. Is there any clarification on whether this will be a month-by-month application, or once you meet the test for 1 month, you can be in for the full period?
Good question. I think that's exactly why the rules are pretty tough to read, unless you're a lawyer. Frankly, I've been through them with my legal hat on. I used to be a lawyer before I did this job, and in doing that, I was looking at it and saying, what does that actually mean? Now, I think what it's saying is this: is that you're prima facie eligible, i.e., you're deemed to be eligible, but there will be a notification process going forward. So it's going to be almost a positive obligation on you to say, I'm no longer eligible. So it's not 6 months and you're done. There will be an ongoing monthly notification, but not a monthly application. So it's going to be a positive obligation on you to say, I'm no longer eligible, rather than, can I please have it again next month?
This next one is from Michelle. She's a client, and it's related to what you've just referred to, but also alluding to what you've said before, Ed, which is she's a client. Her company is Kochie Basketball. I just received a text message from the ATO, which gave an update for JobKeeper. It states step 3 to pay staff, yet step 6 to enroll. Does this mean we have to pay staff prior to receiving official acceptance into the JobKeeper initiative, as it states if you don't pay them, you're not eligible?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this is exactly what we've asked the ATO this morning. We said, are you honestly saying step 3, before I'm eligible, you want me to pay people? Step 6, find out if I'm eligible? That feels a bit like I'm getting carts before horses, chickens before eggs. What do I need to do? The answer there was, we don't know. And we said, well, what do you mean by if I don't pay them, we're not eligible? Does that mean that if I don't back pay them, for example, so if I pay payroll in the usual way, including that if they're stood down, I don't pay them at the moment, but then as soon as you told me they're eligible, I'll go back and give them $1,500 and claim it back from you? Answer from the ATO, I don't know. So that's unfortunately no use to any of us as business owners. But in the absence of a clear understanding from the ATO, then I think that prudence has got a trump, and prudence says don't pay. You've got to wait and see. Now, when I'll speak a number of times before the end of April, we'll be doing this daily, certainly until then, and I'll be giving you guidance on it there, because there is a question that as we approach the end of April, do you start needing to make commercial decisions? If we still haven't heard from the ATO, are we worried that if we don't pay in April at all, are we going to be disqualified for some reason from April? The answer would typically be, well, you're going to be in no worse situation unless you've already got employees that you are having to pay otherwise. But my personal opinion at the moment would be don't pay at this stage. Certainly, if I had stood down staff and or people on unpaid leave and or people on less than $1,500 a fortnight that I was being asked to top up out of my cash flow, then I wouldn't be paying them at this time. But we're going to update daily. We're going to keep speaking to the ATO and saying, come on, guys, tell us more about what it is. You can't just say, we don't know if you're going to qualify or not, and then tell us to pay staff without confirming we're eligible. It's madness.
A general one from David, but with a lot of people waiting on the answer. Are employees required to work for the JobKeeper payments?
Are employees required to work for the JobKeeper payments? The answer is no. If they're an eligible employee and they are, for example, on stand down or agreed unpaid leave, if they are eligible, you should be paying them the $1,500. Now, previously on this, we've sort of scratched our head and said, are you really saying I have to do that for every person, even if they're stood down or not? And the answer is the ATO, the Treasury are currently saying, yes, everyone that is eligible. So my position is that you should be looking critically about who is actually eligible amongst your staff. If someone is not because they are not a casual for 12 months or regular and systematic, then I wouldn't be putting them down as eligible. But if someone is on stand down or unpaid leave and they're eligible, you're meant to be paying them $1,500 even though they haven't worked.
From Helen, she's a client from the Dargo Hotel in Victoria. I am assuming that as JobKeeper payments do not attract superannuation, does this mean that it will also not affect our remuneration value with regards to work cover payments?
Hi, Helen. Thank you for your business at the Dargo Hotel. The answer to that is my belief is that they won't affect your work cover payments, nor would they be considered in any payroll tax calculations because they are not wages. But that's something your accountant will no doubt be needing to work out as well or your bookkeeper when completing your BAS returns and so forth, and also when you're starting to look at renewing your work cover insurance. Because, as you say, you don't want to be getting affected by a higher wage bill than actually the wages that you're really paying. But because they're not wages, I suspect that they're not going to impact premiums.
From Anna. I have an employee that we asked back to work. He came back for one day and then sent a text that he decided to stay home with his pregnant wife for safety and that he was still entitled to JobKeeper. So am I now in a position where I can simply not pay him as he is refusing to not work? What do I do? He is being extremely difficult.
So an employee that's saying they don't want to come into work and they've got a pregnant wife at home, it sounds to be some frustration in that question as well. So the answer to it is this, is that if you are applying for JobKeeper and that person is eligible because they are either a permanent employee that was employed on the 1st of March 2020, if they are permanent, it sounds like they probably were, or they're a regular and systematic casual for 12 months at least on the 1st of March 2020. So if that person falls into that greyness around systematic, regular and systematic casuals, you might deem that they're not eligible and not apply for, not put them forward for JobKeeper. But if they're a permanent and or otherwise qualified, then you should put them forward. But, and this is the but on this, you have the right to be going to that employee and saying, I am asking you as a reasonable management instruction to undertake work for me in accordance with the agreement that we have between us. And if you're refusing that, then we have a disciplinary situation. Now, in a disciplinary situation, that could result in your termination, which will lead to you not being a JobKeeper eligible employee because you won't be an employee at all. Is that the pathway we want to look at going down, or do you want to start coming back to work and playing your part in this? Now, you'll have to work out as a business what the tone of your conversation around that needs to be, depending on what the level of business impact and frustration between parties is. But my message generally is you can't hold back on things like disciplinary and performance management just because of COVID-19. If you've got a business that needs work doing, you've got to get people to do that work within the context, of course, with the obligations under Fair Work and equivalent laws in New Zealand.
From Claudia, she's a client. I have 3 businesses under the same ABN. It is saying that there will be a tool we can use to work out the downturn for each individually. Do you know if it is out yet or even how it will work?
Got 3 businesses, each under their own ABN.
Under the same ABN.
Under the same ABN. There will be a tool to work out 30% downturn. I haven't seen the tool. I've looked everywhere. There may well be a tool that comes out. The basic premise of it is it's going to be look at your income that attracts GST if you're registered for GST, and it will be looking at the equivalent period that you choose from the prior year. Now, it's got to be a month. I think the language in the rules said this. It said it's got to be a month that ends no later than March the 30th or so. Or it doesn't end before March the 30th, which I think is saying it can be March the 1st onwards. You've got to choose a month or a quarter to look at. So it should be a reasonably basic calculation to look at your income over that period. And then the question then becomes, if it doesn't show 30%, but you've got other metrics that suggest that you are suffering that sort of downturn, then that's when this discretion will need to be applied by the ATO. I don't know how they'd do that through a tool, to be honest.
From Sharon, a recurring question: can I claim JobKeeper for my apprentices?
Yes, you can claim JobKeeper for apprentices. Subject, there's this question about what if I'm also getting the apprentice subsidy? So have a look at that, Sharon, to see if you're getting the apprentice subsidy or not. I've not seen any information yet. I've been looking to say that you can't get both, but it does seem a bit like you'd be double dipping if you did. So I suspect that will be clarified in any application you make.
From Sean, my business has been shut down for the time being. If I have an employee that is eligible for JobKeeper but has got a casual job at Coles temporarily, can I still pay them JobKeeper?
So if the employee is eligible for JobKeeper, in principle, you would be going to them now and saying, hey, complete this form and come to me and tell me whether you are essentially nominating me as your JobKeeper employer. If they're casual at Coles, they wouldn't be eligible for JobKeeper there because they don't have 12 months service, even if they're regular and systematic. So consequently, they should come back and fill out that form. But basically, until you've got that form from your employees, this is a new stage, guys. It only came out yesterday that the employees are actually going to have to fill out a form to tell you that you are the employer that they want to go and get JobKeeper for them, essentially. So we've talked quite a lot on here about how it was going to work between people with multiple employers, and this seems to be the way. All employers, presumably if the person's in principle eligible, are going to give the employee this form, and the employee is going to say who their eligible employer is by responding to that form and submitting it to you.
From Benjamin, who is a client of EmploySure, I have employees that only work 40 weeks out of 52 in the year and are casuals. Our business transports school students. Does this qualify as regular and systematic for JobKeeper?
Hi, Benjamin. Thank you for your business. So employees 40 out of 52 weeks, it's likely it would qualify if they're casuals, of course, rather than permanent employees. They could be permanent but working with those breaks. Teachers, for example, are permanent employees. Then in that case, if they were casual, then yes, it's likely they'd be regular and systematic. But you need to look at that critically. And as a client, I'd recommend you contact us because there's a commercial underlay to that situation, which is trying to understand whether JobKeeper is something that you want to be applying for. Is it commercially the right decision for you? And if it's not, one of the things that you may look at is showing how these are not regular and systematic employees and therefore not eligible, and you don't want to be submitting their names to the ATO. So give us a call.
From Andrea, she's a client. Thanks for your support. She says, the legislation that was passed talked about fortnightly payments, but the ATO website says monthly payments. Were you able to obtain any clarity about this from the ATO when you spoke to them?
So, Andrew, thanks for your business. Thank you for your support. The answer to that is that the ATO will be paying you monthly. It sounds like it's going to happen within the first 10 days of each month. That's a suggestion in the rules. That's where I'm getting this from, rather than any website summary and so on. It's sort of gone straight to the heart of it. So they talk a lot about this fortnightly thing of $1,500 per fortnight. I think they've done that because that's the pay cycle that you pay your employees on often. It's not true of everyone, but a lot of people do. Just to give you some rational number that you could apply on a fortnightly payroll basis, but you'll actually be receiving the money back from the ATO on a monthly basis.
Ed, this one from Christine is very related to that last one. Are the JobKeeper fortnights related to work hours or pays that fall within that fortnight? The first fortnight is 30th of March to 12th of April. Our payday was 8th of April that related to work done 23 March through to 5th of April. Do we need to top up that payment to $1,500 or start with the next one?
So some subsections to that question. I'd say you don't need to do anything at the moment other than say to your employees that are eligible, if you intend to apply for JobKeeper, I'm intending to apply, please complete this nomination form and send it back to me. That's all you should be doing at the moment, together with on the 20th of April, you should be applying for it. but I wouldn't be topping up anything. I wouldn't be paying extra, regardless of your pay cycle and so forth. Then once we get a bit more clarity as the days go by, remember how quickly this is happening. I was sitting yesterday doing this session. I knew none of this information because it came out at about 3:30 yesterday. So once we know more, then you'll work out relative to your pay cycle, no doubt in collaboration with your bookkeeper, to say, okay, part of that pay cycle wasn't included in JobKeeper. JobKeeper started on the 30th of March. I think it suggests it starts on the 28th because that's the first JobKeeper fortnight, it's calling it. How much do I need to top up in that pay? The reality is, most of the people have already had their first pay cycle, as you have, of the month. And consequently, if they're prudent at all, they wouldn't have paid JobKeeper at it because we're all sitting here wondering what the hell was going on. So you're going to have to go back and top up if you're a JobKeeper eligible business for eligible employees. But don't do it yet. Wait.
A related question from Rochelle to one earlier, a two-part question. I'll ask them both. First part, what happens if your business initially is approved for JobKeeper, but then your business subsequently does really, really well during this period? Will they make you pay things back? Part two, are employees on 457 and 482 visas eligible for JobKeeper? We have several employees that are on these visas and have been with us for a number of years.
So it was Michelle, was it?
Rochelle,
you are a brilliant optimist, I'd say, by the sounds of it. You think that you might have a bad March or April and then everything not just going to go well, but really, really, really well. I like your attitude. Let's assume for a moment that comes true. I hope it does. That in reality, you wouldn't have to pay it back if you qualified for a month, but this ongoing notification would mean that you might not get it for further months. So it sounds like when you pin the ATO down on this, there is going to need to be a level of self-policing to some degree, and these positive obligations on employers to do the right thing. How that's actually going to work in practice, we're going to see as the time goes on. We'll keep updating you day to day, but you wouldn't have to pay it back if you qualified for a period and obtained it for that period. As to 457s, no, they don't qualify. 444s do, which are New Zealand citizens, but otherwise 457s don't. What I'm urging businesses to do is to try and step back from this. Don't look at it as how it applies to each individual. Look at it as a subsidy which is otherwise flowing into your business and what that means to your overarching wage bill before you rush out and start saying to your 457, sorry, I can't employ you any longer, because there are risks that flow from that relating to any termination of their employment, potential discrimination risks of picking on people because of their visa status. So be very careful before you start rushing out and selecting people based on that.
From Wayne, an employee client from Camp Goodenough in Coorul, New South Wales, with a question regarding to eligibility for casuals. Being a seasonal workplace, that is generally school term dates plus a couple of extra weeks with general maintenance, our casuals work on average 35 to 40 pay weeks. Would that be considered regular and systematic? If a casual only works 26 pay weeks, would that be not regular and systematic?
Wayne, it was, isn't it? It's
yes.
A client at Camp Goodenough. Thank you, Wayne, for your business. The answer to that is similar to the client that works in the transport industry for schools. They may well be regular and systematic casuals. I think we should be having a conversation, Wayne, with you as a client, though, to say, commercially, what are you wanting to do here? Are you wanting to apply for JobKeeper with the consequent potential, assuming they're not working at the moment, of having to pay out of your cash flow the 1,500, which employees should be eligible, which are you going to put forward? How are you going to do that nomination process over the next week? So I'd urge you to give us a call so that we can work out who we think is potentially eligible, who you might say you don't think is eligible, because I think the ATO is basically going to take a self-certification on this. If you say, I've got 20 employees and I think this 10 are eligible, for these reasons, and I think this 10 aren't, I think they're going to take that at face value, if I'm honest. I just don't know how they're going to critique it otherwise. in face value could mean that some of your employees are eligible, some are not, depending on how big a net you use to define them.
From Verity, my husband and I are employees and work actively in our private company structured business, for which we are also both directors. It has been closed by the government as it's a swim school. Do we apply as employees for JobKeeper?
So both husband and I are both employees of the swim school,
and both directors.
And both directors. So you would apply as employees and get the benefit as a subsidy as an employee. You wouldn't then, on top of that, be able to get the director one for you or your husband because you're both employees.
From Sharon, if a PT employee received about $300 for the first JobKeeper fortnightly cycle and they are okay with that amount, will the employer be fined if they only start $750 week payments from the third week of JobKeeper and claim JobKeeper from that third week?
So the way JobKeeper is working is because of this fortnightly basis. It's not the way it gets paid to you, but the way it gets categorized is that you can't, in a JobKeeper fortnight, which starts on, I'm just going to look here, I think it was Monday the 28th of March. Is that a Monday? That's when the first fortnight started, and basically thereafter there's going to be fortnightly chunks until the end date in September. So you can't, if you are eligible for even one day of a fortnight, so let's say you are eligible from the 14th day of a fortnight, you would pay the eligible employee $1,500 for the entirety of that fortnight, rather than giving them some prorated element for the fortnight. That's the way it works when you delve into the rules. So let's say you applied and were found to be eligible on the last day of the second fortnight in April, you would pay them $1,500. I think that answers that question, Stuart. Is that what was being said?
Yes. From Emma, 2 questions, and they're both really interesting. Number 1, what would be the reason as an employer that you would not apply for JobKeeper? And number 2, if I'm forcing, her words, annual leave currently, can I use the $1,500 to offset the payment to employees on annual leave? And if so, is it at their full rate? Some of my staff are on 70K, some are on 140K.
So 2 questions. So why commercially would you not apply for JobKeeper? It's quite a few reasons here. I think I'm going to start with the current and very real reason, which is cash flow. That's the main thing. So in this time when we are all stretched, but different businesses to different limits, the fragility of the business means that the government today is urging us to pay JobKeeper, notwithstanding the fact that we might not be eligible, and it says that we're going to get it in May. But what happens if that changes because they just get overwhelmed in the system and I don't, in fact, get it until June? Yeah, all of those questions. There's so many ifs and buts that for me, a prudent business owner with difficulties with cash flow might choose not to be the person that is paying this out. Related to that reason, we've had some examples of clients and other people coming through on this stream saying, I am a business that has, let's say, 50 casuals, all of whom earn relatively low amounts on a fortnightly basis. Let's say they earn a couple of $100 a fortnight. So you are being asked to fund the top up of $1,300 for 50 casuals. And that's a heck of a cash flow imposition on you that you're not used to paying. You're paying what, 6 or 7 times the amount of your normal payroll in difficult cash flow circumstances. And regardless of the fact you might get it back next month, you might say, I just don't have the way to fund that until next month. So that's one way. The more theoretical or hypothetical situations are that if you use this now, this subsidy, there's no suggestion that it's going to be clawed back by the government or anything like that. But you might have commercial reasons for not using it. You might be in the process of selling your business, and you don't want to be inhibited by the fact that you were using JobKeeper. There's all sorts of a commercial swirl of reasons that you might choose not to. But I'd accept that generally the preponderance of businesses, if they've had a downturn that looks anything like the 30%, should be looking pretty closely at this and most likely will be using it. The second question was, can I use this to offset holiday pay? The answer is yes. And this is, I suppose, relates to the first question as well, that I've not really understood why people would put people on paid annual leave at the moment. For me, all you're doing is running down their leave balance. You're not cash flow benefiting the business anyway, because you're still paying them out their annual leave. So that, to me, you might as well have the people there working, unless you're just trying to reduce the leave balance on your balance sheet. So if you can afford to do that out of cash flow, you can then essentially fund that through JobKeeper, meaning that when we all come out the other side of this, you'll have a decreased leave balance, which the government has been helping you pay out. That's the reality of the situation. So you can do that if you want.
From Sue with a recurring question. Hi, Ed. We have 2 school-based apprentices. They are employed as part-time employees, over 16 years old, and work 1 day a week with us and spend 1 day a week at training. The other 3 days they attend their regular school classes. So we pay them for basically 2 days a week. They both appear to qualify for the JobKeeper payment. So will I be paying them $1,500 per fortnight?
Yes, it appears that way if they qualify. How old were they?
16.
So as long as they were 16 on the 1st of March 2020, and they've been with you, they'd sound like they'd be categorised in a form of permanent employment, albeit part-time. Then in essence, you would be paying them the top up. And that's a classic reason why you might choose not to, because that's just too much of an imposition or burden on you. When in reality, you might be saying to them, to the extent that you have got a cash flow limit on you, you're not receiving the income that you might otherwise receive, then you should be going to Centrelink and asking about that.
From Timothy with a very interesting question. We're in the events business that has lost 80% of its trade. We have a number of employees on stand down. Can we bring them off stand down to do some business improvements and self-development on JobKeeper, and then put them back on stand down once JobKeeper dries up?
Timothy, in events, can he bring people back off a stand down in order to do various bits of work? Yes, that is the case. There's a bit of complexity around, can you force people to do that, or do you need to seek their agreement? I'm hoping what I don't hear in practice is a lot of disputes about people that are at home, not working, seeking JobKeeper, and then getting JobKeeper and then not coming in for a couple of hours here and there when they're needed. But it's a potential area for dispute. Whether you can actually force them is a difficult one. You can certainly force people to take, after consultation, take reduced hours under this JobKeeper-enabled stand down. But when they're already stood down, can you force them to come back? It's not clear. My suspicion is that what will happen is that people will interpret it to be able to use a strong arm to get people back in to do some work if they need to be. Then at the end, once JobKeeper finishes, if you're still currently in a stoppage of work situation, I hope you're not by the time JobKeeper finishes in September, then you could in principle carry on or return them to stand down, if you like, under the Fair Work Act. But my hope is that by September, you won't be suffering a stoppage of work in a way that would qualify you to do that.
From Nicola with a variation on a theme question. If we have 100 employees stood down and 30 still working, are we able to elect for only the 30 to be eligible and pay only those 30?
100 employees stood down, only 30 eligible.
And 30 still currently working.
Can we only pay the 30 that are still working?
Yeah.
So first of all, I'd love to have a look in detail. Was that a client, Stu?
No.
I'd love to look in detail at those 100 employees to see if really they're all eligible. It may be that some are casual and are said to be regular and systematic, but there may be a view that they're not. And if they're not regular and systematic, then you wouldn't be nominating them for being eligible. You'd tell them on our recommendation that they are not eligible because of their lack of regular and systematic work. And then you'd refine as to who you're going to actually nominate to the ATO. Remember that those people are doing less hours may also have other jobs that they're going to nominate for their JobKeeper purposes. So first of all, you need to look at that. But in theory, if, let's say, hypothetically, if all 100 of them, even though 30 of them are working at the moment, 70 are not, if all 100 of them were all permanent employees on the 1st of March 2020, then the ATO is saying, yes, you're going to pay them all $1,500 regardless of whether they're working or not.
From Brad, What happens for employees who resign partway through the JobKeeper scheme? In our situation, we have a casual staff member who is planning to leave in June. Do we need to keep paying them post-June for JobKeeper, even if they have left the business?
No, you don't. So you'd notify the ATO that they've left, and the payments would stop. So you'd only pay them for the fortnights, even in part of a fortnight, as I understand it, that they are employed by you.
From Rebecca, are we able to ask our staff to do online training from home to help upskill them with the JobKeeper payment?
Yes, you could ask your staff to do training from home. Let's assume they've been stood down. You want to upskill them, you want to get them to do some work from home, then yes, you can ask them to do that. As I said, it's not entirely clear from the legislation whether you can, if someone's already stood down, you can make them do extra work. Certainly the sentiment behind the legislation is that people should be coming in and collaborating on this. But certainly you can unilaterally reduce someone's hours. It's not entirely clear whether you can then subsequently increase them. But that I hope is the spirit that people work in.
One more?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm in no hurry. There's a lot of questions today.
There are a lot of questions, Ed.
So I'm more than happy to answer another.
From Diane, if an employee has already signed up for JobSeeker, can they change over to JobKeeper?
So someone's on JobSeeker, can they change over to JobKeeper? Yes, as soon as they start getting payment from their employer, they'd need to notify. It's not really your problem as an employer. They'd need to notify Centrelink of that, and they'd stop getting those benefits. They're under a positive obligation to notify Centrelink of any other income they get. One of the questions we've been getting quite a bit, though, is what happens if an employee says, I want JobSeeker, not JobKeeper, because presumably I've got some other form of benefits. And if I get JobKeeper, particularly in those employees that are receiving less than $1,500 in income, and you top them up and they suddenly become ineligible for benefits that are otherwise getting. That's a really interesting question. To be honest, there's not a clear rule about that. The best advice I could give at the moment would be to, when you're submitting your list of eligible employees, you might be saying, I've got this person or these people that have expressly asked me when I've sought to nominate them, and they have not agreed in the nomination form. And that's what that employee would essentially be doing. I might be eligible, but I'm not putting my nomination forward. And there seems to be this two-way street here suddenly that occurred yesterday, which is there is a form that you need to issue to your employees. Let's get cracking with that today. And no later than the 20th, so that when you come to put forward your own nomination for eligibility on the 20th of April, you're saying that these are the employees that have returned forms to me. Essentially, I thought, let's say 10 of them were eligible, only 8 of them have come back with forms, so those are the 8 that I'm applying for. I'm not applying for the 10. Good. Excellent. Thank you, guys. We'll do some hard work here today to get a couple of things out to you. There'll be some updates to our employshore.com.au/coronavirus anyway. But we will also put out some updates in the form of something that looks like an infographic, I'd say, that just looks at the flow of decision making as to when and why you might make certain decisions about JobKeeper. And we'll go from there. But thanks, as ever, for your viewing today.